is Jason, I'm 35 years old and I live in Albuquerque. A few weeks ago I was driving alone through Arizona, crossing an interstate during the middle of the night. I had left work late and decided to go ahead with the trip anyway, because I wanted to reach my destination early the next day. After a few hours of driving nonstop, I started to feel the fatigue setting in, that heavy-eyed feeling struggling to keep focus on the road. I decided to stop at a rest stop that appeared along the way, mainly to use the bathroom, wash my face, and stretch my legs. When I pulled into the parking area, it was clear the place was practically empty. There were only one or two trucks parked farther away, probably with drivers sleeping inside. The rest was just open space, bright lighting from tall poles, and that typical late-night silence. I parked near the bathroom entrance, turned off the car, automatically checked the doors like I always do, and got out. I clearly remember turning off the headlights because the dashboard light goes off, and I always check that before leaving. I walked to the bathroom, did what I needed, and stayed there for a few minutes trying to wake myself up a bit. When I came out and started walking back to the car, still a bit distracted, the first thing that caught my attention was the light. From a distance, I could already see that my car's headlights were on. I stopped walking for a second, trying to understand. My first reaction was to think I had simply forgotten to turn them off, which wasn't impossible since I was tired. But that didn't quite add up, because I clearly remembered checking the dashboard before leaving. Still, I kept walking toward the car, trying not to jump to conclusions. As I got closer, something else started to seem wrong. The driver's door wasn't completely closed. It was slightly open, just a few centimeters, but enough to notice even from a distance. That immediately put my body on alert. I have a habit of always closing and locking my car, especially on the road, so that didn't feel like a simple mistake. I slowed down without realizing it, trying to observe my surroundings more carefully. I looked around the parking lot, toward the trucks in the distance, but there was no one visible. The silence felt heavier now. I stopped a few steps away from the car, not approaching it completely. I don't know exactly why, but something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the combination of things not adding up. I stood there, trying to observe without being obvious, glancing subtly at the windows. That's when, through the reflection on the door glass, I saw movement inside the car. It was quick but clear enough. Something moved in the back seat. It wasn't a shadow from the light, it wasn't an outside reflection. It was like someone shifting position, a real movement. My body froze instantly. I felt that cold sensation rise through my chest, that immediate reaction of danger. I didn't turn my head directly to look because something told me that wouldn't be a good idea. Instead, I took a slow step back, keeping my expression as neutral as possible, as if I hadn't noticed anything. My heart was pounding and I tried to keep my breathing controlled so I wouldn't panic right there. The only thing running through my mind was that someone was inside my car, and I had no idea how they got in. I kept backing away slowly without making any sudden movements, trying not to draw attention from whoever was inside. Each step felt slower than it really was because my mind was racing. I kept my gaze slightly off, as if I were just casually walking back to the car without noticing anything. Once I was at a safe distance, I subtly turned my body and walked straight toward the rest stop building, trying to act normal. As soon as I went inside, I felt a small sense of relief being in a closed, lit space. I went straight to an area where there was an emergency phone and also better cell signal. My hands were shaking as I dialed. I quickly explained the situation, trying to be as clear as possible. That there was someone inside my car, that I had just seen movement in the back seat, and that the door was open. The person on the other end told me not to return to the vehicle and to wait inside the building. I stayed near the glass door, looking out toward the parking lot, trying to keep the car in sight without exposing myself too much. While I waited, I tried not to stare at the car too obviously, but I also didn't want to take my eyes off it completely. At times I thought I saw some movement inside, but I couldn't be sure because of the distance and the strong lighting reflecting off the glass. Time seemed to move very slowly. Each minute felt much longer than normal. My body was tense, that feeling that something could happen at any moment. But at the same time, there was no sound outside, no clear sign of action. After a few minutes that felt much longer, I saw the lights of a police car entering the parking lot. Two officers got out and I quickly went over to them, explaining the situation again. They approached my car carefully, one on each side, first observing from the outside. I stayed a few steps back, not getting too close. One of them slowly opened the driver's door, while the other stayed alert on the opposite side. They looked inside, shined a flashlight, and there was no one. The car was completely empty. I stood there for a few seconds without reacting, trying to process it. I had seen someone inside. It wasn't doubt, it wasn't imagination. Still, the officers checked everything. The front seat, the back seat, the floor, the trunk. Nothing. No sign of anyone hiding. One of them asked if I was sure about what I saw, and I said yes, explaining exactly the movement I had noticed through the reflection. They didn't seem to completely doubt me, but they also had nothing concrete to confirm it. That's when one of them asked me to come a little closer to the car. When I approached the back door and looked inside with the flashlight, I saw something that made me even more uncomfortable. The back seat was wet. It wasn't an old stain. It looked recent, with the fabric still dark and damp. I lightly touched it and I could feel it hadn't dried yet. There was no strong smell of anything specific, but it was clearly different from the rest of the car. It didn't make any sense. There had been nothing wet there before, and I definitely hadn't left the seat like that. The only thing that came to mind was that someone really had been there, and had left just seconds before the police arrived. Story 2. My name is Lauren. I'm 31 years old and I live in Oklahoma City. A few weeks ago, I was on a long solo drive through rural Kansas, crossing the state in the middle of the night. I had left later than I should have and ended up driving a long stretch of road completely in the dark. After a few hours of non-stop driving, I started to feel heavy fatigue, that struggle to keep consistent focus. I decided to stop at a small gas station that appeared along the roadside, mainly to use the bathroom, buy something to drink, and take a quick break before continuing. When I pulled into the parking lot, it was immediately clear that the place was very simple. There was only one pump working. The lighting was somewhat dim compared to larger stations, and there was a small building with the store and the register. There was no one else there except for a car parked far away, which seemed empty. I parked near the entrance, turned off the car, and went inside. As soon as I walked through the door, I felt the cold air from the air conditioning and the faint smell of old coffee mixed with cleaning products. The place was too quiet. No music, no TV, nothing. Just the low hum of a refrigerator in the back. There was only one employee at the register, an older man, maybe in his early 50s. He was leaning against the counter when I walked in, and he immediately looked up. The way he looked at me made me slightly uncomfortable. It wasn't a quick glance of someone acknowledging a customer. He stared at me for a few seconds longer than normal. I tried to ignore it and went straight to grab a bottle of water and a snack, wanting to finish quickly and get back to my car. While I walked through the aisles, I could feel that he was still watching me, even if he wasn't looking directly the whole time. When I got to the register and placed my items on the counter, he started asking questions that weren't exactly normal for the situation. First, he asked where I was coming from, then where I was going, how much longer I planned to drive that night. His tone wasn't aggressive, but it also wasn't casual. It was persistent. I answered vaguely, trying not to give too many details, but he kept continuing the conversation, always circling back to those same questions. At the same time, he took his time ringing up the items, moving slowly at the register, as if he wasn't in any hurry at all. That started to bother me for real. I was already tired and just wanted to leave, but he seemed to be dragging the situation on purpose. At one point, he directly asked if I was traveling alone. I replied that I was in a hurry and needed to get back on the road, trying to end the conversation. But he didn't react like someone who understood the boundary. He just nodded slightly and kept working the register, typing slowly, looking at the screen as if he were overly focused on something simple. The silence between questions started to feel heavier. When he finally finished, I paid and grabbed my things without saying anything else. I turned to leave immediately, already with that feeling that I just needed to get back to my car and go. I walked to the glass automatic door, expecting it to open like any other, but it didn't. I stopped right in front of it, took a step back, and moved forward again, thinking the sensor hadn't detected me. Nothing. The door remained completely closed. That's when I felt that drop in my stomach, that immediate sense that something wasn't right. I quickly looked around, trying to understand if there was a button or another sensor I hadn't seen, but nothing seemed different. I stepped closer to the glass, trying to trigger it again. Nothing. The door simply didn't respond. That's when I looked back at the register. The employee was watching me silently, making no move to help. That gave me an immediate sense of discomfort. I asked something like, "Is the door not working?" trying to keep my voice as normal as possible. He took a few seconds to respond. Then he said in a low tone that sometimes it just locks at night. He didn't get up, didn't come over to the door, didn't suggest any solution. He just kept watching. That didn't feel like a normal response. Anyone else would have come to check, press a button, unlock it manually. But he did nothing. I felt my body tense up again, that sense of alert coming back strongly. I tried to stay calm, turned back toward the door, and that's when I saw a car pulling into the parking lot through the reflection in the glass. The car moved slowly as if it already knew exactly where to park. From the reflection, I saw it heading straight toward the space next to my car. It didn't look like someone searching for a spot or arriving unsure of the place. It was too direct. My stomach dropped in that moment because it didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like the time I had been stuck inside was exactly the time needed for that car to arrive. I kept watching through the reflection, trying not to turn my body in an obvious way. When the car stopped, I couldn't see who was inside because of the lighting and the angle, but it was clear it wasn't empty. I looked back at the employee and he was still watching me, saying nothing, showing no surprise. That was the moment I knew I had to get out of there no matter what. I pushed the door harder even though it was automatic, and at that moment it suddenly opened as if there had never been any problem at all. That only made the feeling that it had been intentional even stronger. I walked out immediately without looking back, moving quickly toward my car. My heart was racing and I felt that urgency in my body, like I needed to leave before something happened. When I got close to my car, I quickly glanced at the vehicle that had just parked next to it. The interior lights were still off and I couldn't clearly see who was inside. Just a silhouette in the driver's seat. It didn't look like someone using a phone or getting ready to get out. It looked like someone waiting. I got into my car as fast as I could, locked the doors, and started the engine right away. As I reversed, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the employee still standing inside the store, watching me through the glass door. He wasn't doing anything, just watching. I left the parking lot without hesitation, getting back on the road as fast as possible. I can't say for sure what would have happened if I had stayed there longer, but the feeling that stayed with me was very clear. That delay wasn't accidental, and that car didn't arrive there by coincidence. Story 3. My name is Kevin, I'm 26 years old and I live in St. Louis. This happened a few weeks ago while I was driving alone on a highway in rural Missouri. I had left work late and decided to go ahead with the trip anyway because I needed to reach another city early the next morning. It was already pretty late, probably past midnight, and I was starting to feel that accumulated fatigue from hours on the road. I had been driving for a long time without stopping, so when I saw a lit gas station ahead, I decided to pull in to grab a coffee and take a quick break. The station wasn't big, but it also didn't look completely abandoned. It had a few pumps, decent lighting, and a small building with a convenience store. There was a truck parked farther away with its engine running, making that constant low humming sound. Other than that, there wasn't much movement. I parked near the entrance, turned off the car, and sat there for a few seconds, just breathing and trying to wake myself up a bit. I checked my phone, looked at the route, and then got out, heading straight to the store. As soon as I stepped out, I felt the cold night air and that typical silence of a roadside stop at night. The only constant sound was the truck engine running in the distance. I started walking toward the entrance almost on autopilot when I noticed someone coming toward me out of the corner of my eye. It was a truck driver, probably the one from the parked truck. He didn't look nervous, but he also didn't seem like someone just making casual conversation. He walked straight toward me, closing the distance faster than normal. Before I had time to react, he passed close enough and said in a low voice, barely moving his mouth, "Don't stay here." That was it, just that. I turned my head automatically, trying to understand, but he was already heading back toward his truck. He didn't stop, didn't explain, didn't look back. It caught me completely off guard. I stood there for a second, trying to process what had just happened, not knowing if it was some kind of joke, a real warning, or just a strange guy. I watched him climb into the truck, still trying to understand what it meant. He got into the cab quickly, shut the door, and within seconds the truck started moving. There was no pause, no normal delay of someone getting settled before leaving. It was immediate. I stood there with that strange feeling in my body, like I had missed something important. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just weird. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe he was talking about something else. I took a deep breath and continued toward the store. Inside, I grabbed a quick coffee and stayed just long enough to pay. There was no one at the register except for an employee who barely looked up. The place felt too quiet, almost empty for that time. While I waited for the coffee, I caught myself thinking again about what the truck driver had said. "Don't stay here." It didn't sound like a random comment. It sounded like a direct warning. Even so, I tried not to get paranoid. I grabbed the cup and headed back out to the parking lot, already decided on leaving as soon as possible. When I stepped outside and started walking back to my car, the first thing I noticed was that the truck was already gone. The spot where it had been parked was empty, like it had never been there. That gave me a strange feeling because everything had happened so fast. I kept walking, looking around casually without trying to make it obvious. And that's when I noticed two people on the other side of the parking lot. Two men, walking slowly but clearly without a specific destination. At first I tried to ignore them, but as I got closer to my car I realized they were subtly changing direction, as if moving toward the same area. One of them walked in front of my car, quickly glancing inside through the windows. The other stayed a bit farther back, moving slowly but also watching. That made my body go into alert mode immediately. It wasn't normal behavior for someone just passing by. They were assessing the car. I kept walking as if I hadn't noticed anything, but inside my body was fully on alert. I gripped the coffee cup tighter without realizing it, trying to maintain a normal pace until I reached the car. When I was just a few steps away, one of the men stopped on the passenger side and leaned slightly to look inside more carefully, as if checking for valuables. The other started circling the car from behind, walking slowly, not taking his eyes off me. At that moment, it became clear that this wasn't a coincidence. I tried not to show any nervousness, opened the driver's door and got in quickly, locking everything immediately. My heart was racing and I felt that pressure in my chest, trying to stay in control and not act impulsively. I put the key in the ignition, but before starting the car, I looked in the rearview mirror. The man who had circled the car was now standing directly behind it, just a few steps away, as if waiting. I froze for a second, staring at the mirror. He wasn't just passing behind the car like someone leaving. He had stopped there, aligned with the center, as if waiting for the exact moment I would try to reverse. That gave me a very clear feeling that if I made the wrong move, I'd be trapped. I took a deep breath, trying to think quickly without panicking. The other man was still on the passenger side, not too close, but close enough to reach the door within seconds. I kept the car running, but didn't shift gears immediately. Instead, I waited a few seconds, watching, trying to see if they would make any direct move. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them seemed in a hurry. That was the most unsettling part. They were waiting for me to act first. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling my hands sweat, trying to decide the best way to get out without giving them an opening. I decided not to reverse. That felt like exactly what they were expecting. Instead, I turned the wheel slightly to the right and shifted into drive, even though it meant making a tighter maneuver to get out of the space. It was instinct. The moment the car started moving forward, the man on the passenger side took a quicker step, as if trying to follow along. That confirmed even more that I needed to leave without hesitation. I accelerated more than usual, driving past the side of the parking lot without looking back immediately. Only after a few meters did I check the rearview mirror and saw both of them still there, standing, not chasing me, but clearly watching me leave. Neither of them looked surprised. It was like this was just another attempt that didn't work. That thought sent a chill down my spine. The whole situation felt rehearsed, like they had done it before. I didn't slow down until I got back onto the highway. Even then, I kept driving faster than normal for a few minutes just to make sure I was far enough away. It took a while for my heart to slow down. I could still feel the tension in my body, like something could appear behind me at any moment. I checked the rearview mirror a few times, but there were no suspicious cars following me. The road was almost empty, just a few distant headlights. As I drove, that phrase from the truck driver came back strongly into my mind. "Don't stay here." It didn't feel strange or random anymore. It felt too direct to be a coincidence. He had seen something or knew something, and tried to warn me quickly before leaving. And I had almost completely ignored it. If I'd stayed out there longer or taken more time getting into the car, I honestly don't know what would have happened. I kept driving for a long time without stopping, just focused on the road, trying to leave it behind. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense that it hadn't been random. The way the two men moved, one behind the car, the other looking through the windows. It all felt coordinated. There was no conversation, no direct approach, just a pattern of behavior waiting for the person's reaction. It was like they were trying to create a situation where I'd become vulnerable without realizing it. After about 30 minutes, I stopped at another gas station, much larger with plenty of movement. Trucks, bright lights, people coming and going. Only there did I finally start to relax a little. I stayed inside the car for a few minutes before getting out, looking around, making sure everything felt normal. When I finally stepped out, I still felt that leftover tension, like I was expecting something to happen again, but nothing did. Even so, the feeling didn't go away completely. I ended up staying there longer than necessary, just trying to calm down before continuing the trip. I bought another coffee and sat inside the store for a few minutes, just watching the normal flow of people. Truck drivers coming in, people paying for gas, regular conversations. That helped bring a sense of reality back, because the contrast with the other station was so strong. Even so, the image of those two men around my car didn't leave my mind. To this day, when I think about that night, what bothers me the most isn't just what happened. It's what could have happened if I hadn't left at that moment, and especially the fact that someone tried to warn me, quickly and discreetly before everything unfolded. If that truck driver hadn't said anything, maybe I would have stayed out there longer, distracted, without realizing what was around me. And that's what still gives me chills to this day. Story 4. My name is Derek. I'm 33 years old and I live in Houston. This happened a few months ago while I was driving alone during the early morning hours on a highway in rural Louisiana. I had left late from an appointment and still needed to continue my trip, so I hit the road already tired. After a few hours of driving, I started to feel that urgent need to stop, both to use the bathroom and to get some fresh air. That's when I saw a rest stop sign ahead and decided to pull in. As soon as I entered the parking area, I could tell the place was completely empty. There were no cars, no trucks, nothing. Just the open space, the bright lights from the poles, and that absolute silence you only find in places like that in the middle of the night. I parked near the main building, turned off the car and sat there for a few seconds, just getting ready to step out. I looked around one more time, trying to spot any movement, but there was absolutely no one there. It was just me. I got out of the car and headed straight to the restroom building. The air was humid, that heavy Louisiana humidity you can feel even at night. As I got closer to the door, the sound of my own footsteps seemed too loud in that silence. I pushed the door open and went inside. The lighting inside was bright and white, reflecting off the tiled walls. There was no one there, no occupied stalls, no sound other than the faint echo of the empty space. I went straight to one of the stalls, did what I needed to do, and then spent a few more seconds at the sink, washing my face and trying to wake myself up. That's when I heard the main restroom door close. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. That distinct, solid sound of a door shutting. At first, I thought someone had just come in, which would have been normal. But something about the way the sound echoed made me pay closer attention. I froze for a second, listening, expecting to hear footsteps coming in, but nothing followed. I finished washing my face and stood there for a few more seconds, trying to hear any movement outside or inside the restroom. Nothing. The silence returned completely, as if no one had entered at all. That already started to bother me, because the sound of the door had been too clear to be my imagination. Still, I tried not to overthink it and walked toward the exit. I grabbed the handle and pushed, but it didn't open. I thought maybe I had pushed the wrong way, so I tried again, this time with more force. Nothing. The door didn't move. Right then, my body went into alert mode. I tried the handle several times, pushing, pulling, trying every possible way. It felt like the door was locked, but not from the inside. It felt like something was holding it shut from the outside. That gave me an immediate cold feeling in my stomach. I looked around as if someone might appear inside to explain, but the restroom was still completely empty. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it could be some kind of automatic lock or a safety mechanism. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to hear something on the other side. At first there was nothing, just silence. But after a few seconds I started to hear footsteps. They were slow, moving back and forth very close to the door. It didn't sound like someone walking normally to enter or leave. It was like the person was just pacing outside without urgency, without a clear purpose. That made my heart start racing in a way I couldn't control. I stood completely still, trying not to make any noise. It felt like if I called out or knocked on the door, the situation might get worse. The footsteps continued for a while, always at the same pace, going back and forth. At times, it sounded like they stopped right in front of the door, as if the person was standing there on the other side doing nothing. I could hear my own breathing getting louder in my chest, trying to control it so I wouldn't panic. The minutes started to feel much longer than they actually were. I had no way of knowing how much time had passed, but it felt like I had been stuck there far longer than I should have. The footsteps continued, sometimes closer, sometimes a bit farther away, but always present. There was no attempt to open the door from the outside, no sound of someone trying to talk to me. Just that constant movement, like the person was simply waiting for something to happen. Then, without any warning, the footsteps stopped. It went completely silent again. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to figure out if the person had left or was still standing there on the other side without making a sound. I carefully grabbed the handle and tried again. This time, the door opened normally. No resistance, no lock, as if it had never been stuck. That confused me even more because it made no sense. I opened the door slowly, looking outside first before stepping out completely. The hallway was empty. No one there, no doors closing, no signs of recent movement. I took a few steps out, still looking around, trying to find any explanation for what had just happened. But there was nothing. The silence returned completely, as if no one had ever been there. I walked quickly to the building exit and pushed the outer door. As soon as I stepped outside, the humid night air hit my face again. The parking lot was still empty, exactly as before. No cars, no people, nothing. Just the light poles illuminating the open space. That's when I looked toward my car and felt a strong chill run through my body. The passenger door was open. I stopped for a second before approaching, trying to understand if that made any sense. I was sure I had locked the car when I got out. It was automatic for me, always had been. Still, the passenger door was clearly open. Not just unlocked, but open enough to see inside. I started walking slowly toward the car, looking around at the same time, trying to spot any sign of someone nearby. There was no one. When I got closer, I looked inside before touching anything. The passenger seat was empty, apparently normal, nothing out of place. But that feeling wouldn't go away. I didn't remember leaving the door like that, and that alone was enough to put me on edge. I closed the door carefully, got into the car quickly, and locked everything immediately. My heart was still racing, and I felt that urgent need to get out of there as fast as possible. I started the car right away without even properly adjusting the seat or mirrors. As I turned the engine on, I quickly checked the rearview mirror and looked around, expecting to see someone appear. Any strange movement. But there was nothing. The parking lot was still completely empty, as if I had been the only person there the entire time. That only made everything worse because there was no explanation for what had happened. I left the rest stop as fast as I could, getting back onto the highway without looking back. For several minutes, I still felt that tension in my body, like something could appear behind me at any moment. I checked the mirrors multiple times, but there were no cars following me. The road was practically deserted. Even so, the feeling that someone had been there, very close to me without me ever seeing them, wouldn't leave my mind. After a few miles, I finally started to slow down a bit and breathe more normally. Still, my mind kept going back to the same sequence of events. The bathroom door closing, being locked from the outside, the footsteps, the silence, and then my car door open. None of it connected in a logical way, but at the same time, it didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like someone had been there the whole time, controlling the situation without revealing themselves. To this day, what bothers me the most isn't just the fact that I was stuck in that bathroom for a few minutes. It's the behavior of whoever was outside. They didn't try to come in, didn't say anything, didn't make any noise other than the footsteps. They just stayed there, walking back and forth as if waiting. And the moment the door opened, the person simply disappeared. After that, I never stopped at a completely empty place during the night again. Story 5. My name is Eric, I'm 41 years old, and I live in Bakersfield. I've been working as a night clerk at a gas station in rural California for a few years. The overnight shift is usually very quiet, sometimes too quiet. Most of the time I'm alone, helping the occasional customer who shows up now and then. That kind of routine makes you notice details you might not catch during the day. And that's exactly what made that night stick with me. It was a normal early morning, around 2 or 3 a.m. I don't remember exactly. There was basically no movement. I was inside the store, organizing some things behind the counter when I saw a car slowly pull into the lot. There wasn't anything particularly strange about the vehicle itself. It was just a regular sedan, but the way it entered caught my attention. It didn't go straight to a pump. First, it drove slowly past the front of the store like it was scanning the place and only then stopped at one of the pumps farther from the entrance. I watched through the window as it parked. The car stayed on, but the driver didn't get out. That wasn't very common at that hour since people usually step out quickly, fuel up, and leave. I waited a few seconds to see if he would get out, but nothing happened. He just sat there with his hands on the steering wheel. After a moment, he rolled down the driver's window and made a small gesture with his hand, calling me over. I walked out to the pump, mostly out of habit. As I got closer, I could see his face better, but nothing about him stood out. He was a normal-looking man, maybe in his 30s or 40s with a neutral expression, but his gaze was too fixed. He didn't look away while talking to me. He asked me to fill up a specific amount and made it clear he didn't want to get out of the car. He said he was in a hurry, which didn't make much sense considering how long he had taken to stop. I grabbed the nozzle and started pumping, but while doing that, I noticed he kept staring straight at me without breaking eye contact. It wasn't the normal look of someone waiting for the service to finish. It was constant, like he was analyzing every movement I made. At one point, he asked if I was alone that night. I answered yes automatically without thinking much about it. Right after, he asked again in a slightly different way, as if trying to confirm the answer. That made me uncomfortable, but I tried not to show it. I kept fueling, occasionally glancing at the pump display to track the amount. He asked the same question a third time, this time more directly. "Do you always work here alone?" The tone wasn't aggressive, but it also wasn't casual. It was too insistent for such a simple question. I gave a vague answer, saying it depended on the day, trying not to give too much information. Even then, he didn't break eye contact. While the fuel was still going in, I started noticing more things. The car was still running, which isn't common during fueling, and he wasn't doing anything besides staring at me. No phone, no movement, nothing. Just that constant focus. At one point, I thought I saw him glance quickly behind him, like he was checking something outside my line of sight. But then he went right back to staring at me. That made the feeling that something was off even stronger. Then another car pulled into the station. I heard it coming from the road and saw the headlights approaching in the reflection of the store window. The moment the second vehicle entered the lot, the man's behavior changed completely. He broke eye contact for the first time, looked toward the other car, and without saying anything told me to stop fueling right there, even though it hadn't reached the amount he had asked for. It was too abrupt with no explanation. I was still processing that when he rolled the window up and started driving off. I tried to say something like pointing out that the amount wasn't complete or asking about payment, but he didn't respond. He just drove away with the car still moving, leaving the pump behind. That alone was strange, but what stood out the most was how quickly he reacted to the arrival of the other vehicle. It didn't feel like normal urgency. It felt like someone who decided to leave the exact moment he realized he wasn't alone with me anymore. The second car parked near the store entrance, and I tried to act normal with the new customer, but my mind was still stuck on what had just happened. While helping them, I kept glancing toward the spot where the first car had been, trying to make sense of it. It didn't add up for someone acting that way just to get gas. Once things got quiet again, I went back inside with that uneasy feeling still there. After the place was empty again, I started mentally replaying everything that had happened. It wasn't just one thing, it was the combination of everything. The way he entered slowly, the time he took to stop, the fact that he stayed in the car, the repeated questions. It all felt calculated. That bothered me more than it should have. I've worked this kind of shift long enough to know when something is outside the norm, and that definitely wasn't normal. That's when I remembered the security cameras. We have access to some of the recordings through the store's internal system. I decided to rewind a bit to see exactly when that car had arrived. When I started reviewing the footage, it took me a few seconds to find the vehicle. And when I did, I noticed something that immediately made me uneasy. He hadn't arrived at the moment I first saw him. He had been there much longer. I went back a few more minutes in the recording, then further until I found when the car had actually entered the station for the first time. And then it became clear. He had arrived about 30 minutes before I noticed him. During all that time, he hadn't gone straight to a pump. He had been slowly driving around the lot, sometimes stopping in darker areas, then moving again, always keeping some distance from the store. At certain moments, he stayed completely still with the engine off, as if just watching. What bothered me the most was realizing that in several of those moments, the car was positioned in a way that gave a direct view into the store, exactly where I stood at the register. He wasn't there by accident. He was evaluating the place, the movement, maybe waiting for the right moment. And the moment he chose to approach was exactly when there was no one else there. Until that second car showed up. That made me think that if that other customer hadn't arrived right then, the situation could have turned out very differently. Story 6. I'm 34 years old, and I work installing industrial equipment, so I spend a lot of time driving between smaller cities. That week I was coming back from a job in rural Texas and needed to cross part of Arkansas during the night to reach my destination the next day. It was already past 2 a.m., and I had been driving for hours without seeing another car on the road. That feeling of an empty road starts to weigh on you after a while. The body gets tired, the mind slows down. I decided to stop at the first 24-hour gas station I could find, mostly to use the bathroom, grab a coffee, and take a quick break before continuing. The station appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the road, one of those very simple ones with a small lit store and a few pumps out front. There were no other cars parked there. I pulled in near the entrance, turned off the engine, and sat in the car for a few seconds, just stretching and looking around. The place was too quiet, even for that hour. The white lighting made everything feel flat and empty. When I got out of the car, the air was slightly damp and cold, and I could hear a constant hum from the lights. I walked into the store, and the only person inside was the cashier behind the counter, looking at me the moment I came through the door. He looked to be in his mid-40s, thin, short hair, nothing particularly unusual at first glance. But the way he looked at me when I entered was a bit too direct. It wasn't that automatic glance of an employee greeting a customer. It was like he was actually observing me, assessing me. I just nodded quickly, grabbed a cup of coffee from the machine, and started walking around the store, more to wake myself up than to buy anything. The place was small, with 2 rows of shelves and a side hallway leading to the bathroom. I noticed there was no music playing, no radio, nothing. Just that silence with the sound of the refrigerator and the coffee machine. While I was there, he started making conversation out of nowhere, in a way that felt a bit too casual for that time of night. He asked if I was traveling alone, where I was coming from, where I was going. I gave basic answers without going into detail, just out of politeness. That's when he commented, as if it were normal, that the station was quiet because the cameras don't work properly at night. He said it while pointing with his chin toward a corner of the store, near the bathroom hallway, saying that area wasn't recorded during the night. I found it strange that he would mention that to a customer, but I gave a light laugh like I wasn't taking it seriously, and kept stirring my coffee. As I stirred the coffee, I started thinking more about what he had said. It wasn't just the content, it was the way he said it. He spoke very naturally, like he was used to telling that to people who came in. I glanced around, trying to identify where the cameras were. There was one on the ceiling near the entrance, another above the register, but the side hallway really did seem out of their angle. I didn't think much of it at the time, but that information stuck in my head. I just wanted to pay and leave, so I started walking toward the counter. That's when I noticed something strange. Instead of me going straight through the more open space, he made a slight gesture with his hand, subtly indicating I should come more from the side, exactly along the path that passed near the hallway he had mentioned. It wasn't obvious, not a direct, come this way, but subtle enough to feel intentional. I slowed down a bit, not fully understanding, but kept walking. As I got closer, I felt that discomfort starting to creep in, that sense that something wasn't quite right, even though I couldn't point out exactly what. As I passed closer to that hallway, almost by reflex, I glanced to the side, trying to see the bathroom or anything else there. It was just a narrow space, with a door at the end and a section of wall that really was out of the camera's angle. I felt a slight unease but kept walking to the counter. The cashier was already waiting, leaning slightly forward, looking straight at me again in that same fixed way. I placed the coffee and some random snack on the counter, trying to keep everything as normal as possible. While he was ringing it up very slowly, he brought up the cameras again. This time, more specifically, he said that at night the system glitched sometimes, and that no one ever fixed it because hardly anyone came through there. He even looked up toward one of the cameras, then toward that same uncovered corner. That's when I started to feel truly suspicious. It wasn't just random conversation. He was reinforcing it. And in the middle of that, without making any noise at all, I noticed a slight movement behind me coming from the direction of the store, like someone had entered. I turned immediately, more out of instinct than anything else, and what caught my attention wasn't just that someone was there, it was how he appeared. I didn't hear the door open, I didn't hear a bell, didn't hear any footsteps from the entrance. There was simply a man inside, already a few meters behind me, standing near the shelves. He wasn't looking at products, wasn't doing anything a normal customer would do. He was just there, standing. And the worst part was that he was exactly in line with that side hallway, partially hidden by the area the cashier had just mentioned. At that moment, I felt a very clear warning. My body reacted before I could think. I quickly turned back to the counter, trying not to show anything, and noticed the cashier was looking at me with a slight smile, almost imperceptible. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind that doesn't match the situation. He finished ringing things up very slowly, as if he had no rush at all, while I already had my wallet in hand, ready to pay and leave. But he didn't give me the total right away. He kept tapping on the system for a few seconds longer than necessary. That's when I realized he was stalling. There was no other reason to take that long with two simple items. I glanced to the side again, without fully turning my body, and I could see the other man moving a little closer, still without making a sound. He wasn't picking anything from the shelves, wasn't pretending to shop, just getting closer bit by bit. And the path he was taking led exactly to that part of the store that was out of the camera's reach. My heart really started racing at that point because it no longer felt like a coincidence. I pulled my card out faster and inserted it into the machine before he even finished saying any amount. I said something like, "Just run it," trying to cut off any conversation. He looked at me for a second, a bit surprised, but didn't say anything. Just pressed a few buttons and processed the payment. I didn't wait for the receipt, just grabbed my things and started turning to leave. When I did, the other man was much closer than I expected, almost at the hallway. He stopped when he realized I was looking directly at him, completely still. I didn't wait any longer. I went straight to the door, trying to keep my pace steady but not run. My mind was racing, but at the same time focused only on getting out. When I reached the door, I felt that early sense of relief from being almost outside, but the door didn't open at first. I pushed, and it stuck for a second like it was heavy or jammed. My whole body froze, and I quickly looked back. The cashier hadn't moved. He was still behind the counter, watching me, and the other man had taken another step, still silent. That's when I pushed the door harder, almost with my shoulder, and it finally opened. The cold night air hit my face instantly. I walked out quickly without looking around and went straight to my car. I got in, locked everything immediately, and started the engine with a slightly shaking hand. Before driving off, I looked in the rearview mirror. The store door was still open and both of them were standing inside near the entrance. Neither of them tried to come after me. They just stood there watching. I didn't wait any longer. I left and kept driving without stopping for over an hour. After that, I kept thinking about what would have happened if I had taken just a few more seconds or followed exactly the path the cashier wanted. Story 7. I'm 29 years old and I work closing a small gas station on a rural road in the interior of Utah, one of those places that are practically isolated, with nothing but desert around, and a highway that barely sees any traffic during the night. I took this shift because it paid a little more, and on most nights it's pretty quiet. My schedule is always the same. I start at night and stay until just before dawn when I close up, turn off the exterior lights, and leave everything ready for the next shift. The routine is always the same with very little variation. After a few weeks working there, you start to recognize every sound, every detail of the place. It was about a month in when I started noticing a car on the other side of the road. At first I didn't pay much attention, because it's common for someone to stop there to rest or check their phone. But that car started showing up frequently, always around the same time, close to when I would begin closing the station. It stayed parked across the road, with its lights off and no sign of movement. And the strangest part was that it never crossed over while the station was still fully lit. The first few times I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was probably just someone resting or waiting for the right time to continue their trip. But after several nights in a row seeing the same car there, always in the same position, it started to bother me. I began paying closer attention to the exact time it appeared. It wasn't perfectly precise, but always within a window of about 10 to 15 minutes before I started turning off the exterior lights. And during all that time, it remained completely still. No interior light, no doors opening, nothing. There was one night when I decided to observe more closely. I turned off only part of the exterior lights, leaving the rest on, just to see if there would be any reaction. I stayed inside the store, watching through the cameras and also through the window. The car remained parked on the other side without any movement. That made me think maybe I was overthinking it, seeing patterns where there weren't any. Even so, that strange feeling didn't go away. So I started doing something I hadn't done before. Every night before closing, I would look directly at the road just to see if the car was there. After a few more days, that had already become part of my routine. I didn't even have to think about it. My eyes would go straight to that spot on the road almost automatically. And the car kept appearing. Always parked, always in the dark, always keeping its distance. There was one specific night that stood out more, because I spent a little longer looking directly at it. I tried to see something inside, any movement, but the distance and lack of light made it impossible. It was just the silhouette of the car against the dark background of the road. That same night, I had the idea to try something different. Instead of following my usual routine, I decided to turn off the exterior lights earlier than usual. Normally, I would leave everything on until I was almost done closing, but this time I wanted to see if it made any difference. I don't know exactly why I had that idea. It was more curiosity mixed with that growing discomfort. So I went to the control panel and shut off the lights in the lot well ahead of schedule. As soon as the lights went out, the entire station changed. It became much darker than I expected, because there's almost no external lighting out there besides the station itself. The only light left was from inside the store, which barely illuminated anything outside. I went straight to the window, trying to adjust my eyes to the darkness to see the other side of the road. And that's exactly when it happened. The car, which had been completely still until then, started immediately. I heard the engine before I could even see it properly. It was too immediate to be a coincidence. The car's lights came on and it began moving, turning onto the road and heading straight toward the station. There was no hesitation, no normal reaction time. It was as if it had been waiting for exactly that. My body reacted instantly, that sharp alert feeling. I stepped back from the window, trying to quickly process what to do. The car crossed the road and pulled into the lot, now completely dark. The car entered slowly without high beams, just the low lights illuminating the concrete ahead. That made everything even stranger, because it created shadows between the pumps, and I couldn't clearly see who was inside. I stood there behind the counter, not making a sound, trying to observe without being seen. The car didn't go straight to a pump. It passed one, then another, and only stopped when it was almost aligned with the store entrance. The engine kept running, but no one got out. I waited a few seconds, expecting some normal reaction, someone opening the door, coming into the store, anything. Nothing happened. The car just stayed there, the engine humming softly in the silence. That's when I started noticing something else that made me even more tense. From where I stood, I could partially see inside the car because of the light from the store reflecting, and it looked like there was more than one person inside. I couldn't see faces, but I could make out subtle movements like someone shifting position. I kept watching, trying to adjust my vision to be sure of what I was seeing. The more I focused, the more it seemed like there were at least 2 people inside, maybe even 3. But no one made any normal movement of someone who had stopped at a gas station. No one opened the door. No one checked a phone. No one looked around. It was like they were just waiting. That gave me a very bad feeling, because there was no clear reason for them to be there like that, especially at that time and in that place. Then one of the car doors opened very slowly. It wasn't the quick movement of someone getting out. It was slow, controlled. My body froze immediately. The person who got out didn't come straight to the store. They stood next to the car for a few seconds, just standing there looking around. I couldn't see their face because of the darkness, but I could tell from their posture. They were alert, observing the surroundings. And at that moment, I had a very clear feeling that they had been waiting for the station to go dark so they could approach without being seen clearly. At that point, I realized staying exposed behind the counter wasn't a good idea. I crouched down a bit, staying more out of the direct line of the window, but still able to see outside from the corner. My mind was trying to decide quickly what to do. Call the police, lock the door, and stay quiet. But everything felt too slow compared to what was happening outside. While I was thinking, another car door opened. Now there were at least 2 people outside. They didn't rush, didn't act aggressively right away. That's what made it more unsettling. They started walking around the lot slowly, spreading out slightly, as if calmly surveying the place. One of them approached one of the pumps, lightly running a hand along the structure, while the other moved more toward the side of the store. It wasn't the behavior of a customer, not someone lost. It was like they were assessing the environment. And the worst part, they didn't speak to each other. Not a single sound. I stayed completely still, just watching from the corner, trying not to make any noise that might draw attention. One of them started moving closer to the front of the store, walking straight toward the door. The other stayed a bit farther away near the pumps, looking around. I felt that heavy pressure in my chest, because now there was no doubt they knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't someone who had stopped by chance. They had waited for the moment everything went dark to move. When the guy reached the door, he didn't try to open it right away. He stood right in front of it, looking inside. For a second, I had the feeling he was trying to see if anyone was there. I crouched even lower, almost squatting, completely out of the window's line. My heart was pounding loud enough that I could hear it. Then I heard the sound of the handle being tested. Slow, controlled, like someone checking if it was unlocked. The door was locked, and I heard him try to turn it again, a bit firmer this time. It didn't open. There was a heavy silence for a few seconds. I didn't move. I barely breathed. After that, he let go of the handle and stepped back. I expected to hear them leaving, but that's not what happened. Instead, I heard footsteps moving along the side of the store. That's when I understood what he was doing. He was looking for another way in. I stood up quickly and went straight to the back hallway where the service door was. My body was on autopilot at that point. I pulled the door and engaged the internal lock, something I normally didn't even do because almost no one ever came by. As I did that, I heard a noise on the other side right near the wall. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to know someone was there, on the other side, standing still. I took 2 steps back, heart racing, trying to think what to do. That's when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I had called the police without even remembering exactly when, probably when they got out of the car. I answered quickly, speaking quietly, explaining that there were people trying to get into the station, that I was alone, that it was an isolated place. The person on the other end started asking questions, trying to stay calm, but I could barely respond properly. While I was talking, I heard the sound of something being tested on the back door, the handle moving slowly, just like at the front. Then, a light knock. Not loud, not aggressive. Just a dry tap, like someone checking the material of the door. I stood there holding the phone, not knowing if they were going to try to force it or give up. After a few seconds that felt much longer, everything went silent again. I didn't hear them leave. I didn't hear a car door or an engine starting, nothing. The police arrived a few minutes later, their lights cutting through the darkness of the road. When I stepped outside the store, they were already checking the lot. The car was gone. There was no one around. No sign that anyone had been there except for the fresh tire marks on the ground. I explained everything, showed where they had stopped, where they had walked. They said it was probably people checking if the place was easy to break into, taking advantage of how isolated it was. That could be true. But what stayed with me wasn't just the attempt. It was the fact that they never approached while the station was lit. They waited until the exact moment everything went dark.
I'm really grateful for staying until the last minute. It's always good to know that you're here, listening to every detail. If you liked it, comment which part was the scariest for you. And of course, sign up to keep listening to stories as dark as this one. See you in the next video.